Genesis chapter 2. And let's go back and dive into, I think, part 5 today of what we call beginnings. Okay? How it all started and worked out. In the 103rd Psalm, it says this, verse 13 and 14, it says this: As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. For he knows how we are formed. Isn't that interesting? That's an interesting statement. He remembers that we are dust. So the Dutch saying that I grew up with, oh, you're toast. You ever hear that? You're toast. That's when somebody told you you're toast. That's not a good thing. Okay? Well, instead of saying you're toast, we need to just say this: oh, you're dust. You're dust. And Scripture would back us up on that. But I love the statement that it makes there at the end. It says this: He knows how we are formed. In other words, He knows you. You're not an accident. Even some of your parents thought you were. You're not. You're here by God's design. You're not an accident. That personality that you possess, God gave it to you. God gave you that personality. It's kind of fun. We had 3 daughters, and I found we had 3 different daughters. They all had their own personality. They were all different. They were all unique. God made them. He made you. Say, I don't like who I am. Well, you really need to wrestle with God over that one. Because God made you, you. Because He wanted you to be you. Because He had a purpose for making you, you. In the 103rd Psalm it says this: The life of mortals is like grass. They flourish like a flower of the field. The wind blows over it and it's gone. And its place remembers it no more. James picked that up. He says, we're but a moment in time, aren't we? And as you get older, you just begin to realize that life flies by. Life's quick. Don't blink. Don't blink. Because life goes fast. And the psalmist said, mortals are like grass. They flourish like a flower of the field. The wind blows and it's gone. Even if you live to be 100. My friend that I went to college with retired from teaching and got a job driving old people around. I'll let you define old people. But he was telling the other day, he told on Facebook a story. He drove a guy from place to place. The guy was 105. And he said, man, the guy was sharp as a tack. He was talking to me. He was up on current stuff. We were yakking away. 105. Now, I think that's old. But that 105-year-old guy, guess what? He didn't act old. So old isn't so much age as it is a mentality. In fact, when I start saying all this young generation, then I'm saying I'm old. Right? So be careful what you say about the next generation. They're going to be at your funeral to say stuff. I've heard some stuff. Yeah, he was a great guy. No, he wasn't. He wasn't so hot. Then the one I like is they out there and then they come up and say, hey, don't you look good? You know, he looks dead. He was old. So when you talk about the next generation, just remember you're saying, I'm old. Okay? And time's limited. Job said it this way. Job said, your hands shaped me and made me. You see, if you're going to deny creation by God, you have a lot more problems than just denying God. Because your hands shaped me and made me. Will you now turn and destroy me? Remember that you molded me like clay will you now turn me to dust again? There's that word dust again. You're dust. You're dead, right? You're toast. Every time, my wife loves taking pictures. In fact, she got over 6,000 pictures on her cell phone. Like, how do you know the pictures that are on there? And I'll just tell you this, trust me, she knows. Because if I would take one off, she would find it. Are you messing with my phone? No, I don't mess with the pictures. But when the two of us die, there will be 6,000 pictures of me and none of her. So when I go, I said, let me take your picture. I take her picture and she goes, well, I don't like that. And I have a response to that I always use, and I always say this, it looks just like you. And that doesn't go over well. What do you want me to say? It looks like the neighbor girl down the street. It looks just like you. You shaped me. You formed me. God did that to you. And on top of it, he would say this to you, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. And that my soul knows right well. Ecclesiastes. Solomon said this, all go to the same place, all come from dust, and all return to dust. There's that word dust again. Solomon. Doing devotions right now, Solomon, everything is empty and vain, meaningless. And this is part of it. Well, everybody goes to the same place. So you can be the worst criminal living on planet Earth. You can be the best moral person that ever lived on planet Earth. Solomon said, you're both going to die. You're both going to be dust in a short time. Solomon said, that's not fair. But that's reality. That's the truth. We came from dust, we return to dust. Genesis says it this way. As we get back to the beginnings, then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground. Figures, doesn't it, women? Dirt. Dirt. So if you want to if you're upset today and you get in a little bit of a spat with your guy, you can turn and say, you're a dirt bag. You're right. You're right on. You're right on. You're dirt. Yep. But husband, you can't do that to her. It doesn't work that way. So God then, from the dust of the ground, he breathed into his nostrils a breath of life, and man became a living being. That's how people were created. They didn't evolve. We didn't go through Neanderthal and all that other stuff. We didn't. God made people. Adam and Eve were real people just like us. And God formed them. God made them. God gave them the personality. And it says that when he decided to make the first man, he reached down into the clay and he took the clay and he formed the clay, and out of that clay he formed a man. And so it says, from dust you came, to dust you shall return. You want to know the most asked question I was asked during all the years I pastored church? You know the number one question was this: is it all right to be cremated? Isn't that awful? That is the most asked question I got in all. Because people, as I got toward the end of their life and I'd deal with them and they'd go through this and they'd be thinking through the future and all this, and it says, what about cremation? And that's the number one answer. So I went, my son-in-law happens to be a funeral director, so I went and I talked to him about this and I had a conversation. I said, tell me about this. He said, ashes to ashes or dust to dust. Take your pick. You're going to one. It's where we're all going. But not for eternity. We're dust. God breathed in life, just as he breathed into you life. You're a living being. What does it mean to be formed out of the dust? We want to talk about dust today. It's really a neat subject that permeates the Bible from really beginning to end. So let's just talk about it for a little bit. It means this, to show that when God created man, he made him mortal. It's an interesting thought, subject to physical death. So when God made Adam, did he intend for Adam to live forever? Or did he make him out of dust, knowing that he was mortal, that God's original intention was that he would die? You say, well, wait a minute. It wasn't until he ate the fruit. No, when he ate the fruit, he died spiritually. I'll just let you think about that. That's an interesting concept. I'm not sure the answer totally of that. But it says this, he was made from dust, he goes to dust. It's simply saying this, we're mortal beings. We're subject to physical death. God made us that way. He made Adam and Eve that way. Fascinating, isn't it? Fascinating. Well, it goes on, it says this is what it means to be dust, mortal. That's it. Simple. So whenever you read the Bible, when you go through the Psalms, or when you go through Ecclesiastes, or when you head into the other books of the Bible and you read that we're made from dust and we're going to return to dust, it just means this. You're a mortal being. You don't possess immortality yet. Only God possesses immortality. Someday you will possess that, but you have to be redeemed to have that. You were created, ultimately, to die. That's why he had to say this to Adam and Eve. He said, be fruitful, multiply. Why did he say that? Because he knew their life was just for a span of time and they needed to replace themselves, multiply, multiply, multiply. Grandkids are well, you know what grandkids are? Children are your punishment for what you did to your parents. You know that? Right? Grandchildren are your reward for not killing your kids. That's what grandkids are. When I a couple of years ago, when we had our first granddaughter, we just turned a teenager, and we were walking, I was holding her hand, we were walking somewhere, and this old lady walked by me. And she stopped. That's your first grandkid. How'd you know that? I can tell. How did she tell? I didn't have a sign on. I wasn't talking. She said, you glow. And then she said this to me. She said, if you think grandkids are great, wait till you have great grandkids. And I'm like, lady, I'm not in a hurry for that. But the reason that grandkids and great-grandkids are great is because you know you're mortal and you're going to die. But your life goes on for your kids, for your grandkids, and for your great-grandkids, and that's your legacy. We're mortal beings. We're dust. And if we don't think that, then we don't make the right preparation for our mortality. And that happens to too many people. This is why God put the tree of life in the garden. Because they needed, it represented that life was outside of themselves. They were mortal. The tree of life was a picture that God is the source of life. Not only, then there was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This is a different tree. The tree of life was there to say, I am the source of your life, not you. And so God put the tree of life in the garden to remind Adam and Eve, and I think this, even in their pre-sin condition, that they were mortal beings. They just didn't understand spiritual death yet. They would when they would eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Then the lights went on. And they could see right and wrong from God's perspective. Still, I don't think Adam and Eve were any different than us. They just didn't sin yet. And had we been there, we would have made the decision that they made. So Adam kind of was our representative in what he did. Thus, mortality, physical death, was built into creation from the very beginning. Let me put it to you this way. When Adam and Eve in that garden had all kind of fruit, they had all kind of trees. There was just one tree that we think was an apple tree. I'm not sure how that apple got pegged with that stigma. It probably wasn't an apple. There's not a lot of apple trees growing over there. They grow in cooler climate. It was probably a mango tree or a jackfruit tree. I don't know what it, nobody knows what it was, but for some reason we associate an apple with that. Where did that come from? That'd be an interesting thing to find out. But when all of this took place, they could eat from all of those trees and they could partake. But picture this. When they picked that mango that was permissible to eat, and they took a big old bite out of that mango, they killed it. They ate it. Killed it. Think of this. God made all of the cattle. And God made, when he made the cattle, he says, eat all the grass you want. You know what happens when that cow went over there and munched on that grass? He killed it. Down to the roots, but there was enough root there that it would keep growing. You see, physical death was built into creation from the very beginning. Spiritual death, we're not talking about yet. Physical death. You got to process that. You got to think that through. I think it's an interesting concept. So the picture, it's not a literal concept. He's painting a picture here. Dust is a picture. Okay? When you see dust, it's a picture of a literal concept. The Bible always does that. God is the original person who can say things and then put it in picture form that we can remember it and not forget it. We always do. Dust is the picture. The word literally means formed. And it can be translated decreed. God decreed that we are dust. In other words, God made a decree. When God makes decrees, we don't mess with them. We're affected by them. So when God made a decree, He made this decree: man will be dust. You will be mortal beings. And all of us understand, no matter what age you are here this morning, you understand your mortality. You do. Because we live with it. We look in the mirror every day and we see it. It grows on us. We're mortal. Why? God made us that way. So the concept is this: God's decree that man's existence in the physical world would be mortal and that man would ultimately die physically. It was a decree that God made from the very beginning of time. I didn't understand that in my understanding of Genesis. It wasn't until I went back and looked at it in some significant detail you began to see, why did God form Adam out of the clay? Why was He doing that? Why does Genesis take time to say that God took clay and molded it and formed it and out came a dirtbag? I mean, a man. Sorry. Because He just wanted them to know you're mortal. All of us are. But if you're mortal, you think about your mortality, then you better start thinking about the tree of life. Because life, and what the picture is going to be, is spiritual life is not in you. Spiritual life is outside of you. I grew up in error. I grew up going to school in the 60s and then graduated high school in the early 70s. So, I'm not old. I'm just got more numbers attached to my name than I used to have. And growing up, most of the teachers that I had at that particular time were, their basic system of religion was humanism. And I remember, because they weren't all. I remember my biology teacher, he said to us as he began to teach, he says, I have to teach you the theory of evolution. He said, just so you know, I'm a Christian, I don't believe it, I'm required to teach it. And he told us in class, he said, I'm a Christian, I believe in creation by God. Now, I'm not sure a teacher could say that today, I don't know. But that's what my biology teacher, Mr. Ox, said years ago in class. But most of my teachers, other teachers, my social studies teacher at the time, as we studied social life and social things, was pretty much a socialist. Her basic religious system and her belief system was a system of humanism that's still prevalent today. And so we were taught this. Inside of you is everything you need. You just have to bring it out. The more I brought it out, the more my dad spanked me. And back in that day, they could do that. If I was living today, I'd sue my dad for everything he had. He'd look at me and say, you got more spankings than all the other kids put together. Yeah, what's that mean? Inside of me is everything I need for existence. What I learned was, no, inside of you, and inside that flesh of yours lies sin. And what you need to know, that's so critical for you to know, is everything you need for life, existence, and eternity is outside of you. It's in God. God has all you need, and you need it because you're mortal. You're going to die. And built into creation from the very beginning is the concept that physical life is outside of ourselves. God had to breathe into his nostrils the breath of life. And it's a picture that for spiritual life to take place, God needs to breathe into your soul the breath of life. See it? Why do I need God to breathe into my soul the breath of life? Because you're going to die. And you don't have inside you what you need. God has what you need. And God has all that you need. That's an important point in life. That's an important point to understand. What about the woman? All right, let's tread where angels won't even go, okay? Guys, don't shake your head. Don't look at your wife. Just sit there like dust. Okay? So the Lord God caused man to fall into a deep sleep. While he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib. He was taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. Ladies, you're not dust, even though you're mortal. So if you go out of here today and you just want to be encouraged, you can look at your husband and say, you're dust, I'm not. You're not. You are uniquely created by God. You know, one time I was doing a wedding and I looked up that passage where it says that a woman is a helpmeet, suitable. It's over, I think it's Ephesians, the helpmeet. So I looked up that word in the original Hebrew language, and the word helpmeet literally means this: one called alongside the miserable and destitute. Seriously. Take Wilson's Old Testament word studies and look it up. The word helpmeet in the Old, suitable for him right here, is I'm going to give somebody to that miserable, destitute guy. Because he needs this. So for us, I have a house, and I take my house and I say to my wife, here's the house. And she makes it a home. She brings color. So it's like the coloring book that you have. When you pick up the coloring book from the store, you open it up, all it is lines. That's the guys. And when you bring the lady, they bring all the different colors, and they color, and that's a beautiful picture. That's the woman. They bring color to it. For some reason, our house needs repainted. Like, I just painted it. What do you need to paint it again for? Well, it needs it. Just say yes. Go ahead, paint it. I don't get it, but it is what it is. This is not written to show how Eve was made, but what her function would be in relation to the man. Okay? It's important to understand. God's showing something very important in this picture that he paints. The picture that is painted here is not to show how he made the woman, but how the woman functions in relation to the man. And I'll just tell you this, as our culture moves farther and farther away from God, what breaks down is the function of men and women. Okay? There's no more groundwork, there's no more basis, there's no more standard, there's no more guidelines. So everybody is left to their own opinion, and what breaks down is, well, I don't know, I'm a man, I was born one, but I don't know if I am one. So it's not you need to know yourself. No, you need to understand who God is, because you can never figure out who you are until you first of all figure out who God is. So you're not going to convince somebody. In fact, our position should be as Christians, as we talk to people who are wrestling with gender confusion, our position should be compassion for them. Not what's wrong with you. I know what's wrong with you. But how can we help you wrestle through this? Because all around us anymore. It's all around us. It's prevalent. But as you move away from God, guess what you're going to wrestle with? You don't understand, because in the beginning God set it up not so that you would know how woman was made, but how men and women function in relation to each other. How it works. The Bible is a book about how, not about what. How. The word rib. This is interesting. Sorry, ladies. I unlocked the back door just in case at the end of this message. The idea of this is a side. It's similar to a side of beef. See, nobody laughed at that. I think that's funny. You don't think that's funny at all, do you? Oh, okay, I'm dust, so you're a side of beef. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? But that's the idea in the original language. It's the other side. It's the other half. It's not like one little section or one little portion. It's like half. That's the picture. The other side of man is woman. The other side of woman is man. They take each other. What if God would have created two women at the beginning? Not the answer is funny, not trying to be sarcastic here, but what if God would have created two men at the beginning? Humanity would have died at that instant when they died. Right? Because it takes a man and a woman to fulfill the mission that Christ said, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. Only in right relationship to God and in right relationship to each other can we fulfill the mandates that Christ gives. It doesn't work any other way. It ultimately will break down. Thus, the woman is the other half of man. And if I may say so myself, the better half. The better half. I won't say that for any other reason than I mean that. My wife is the best thing that ever happened to me. Because my wife is my compliment in every way. I need her. Do you know why in most cases, at the end of life, God God usually takes the man home first. There's far more widows in the church than there are widowers. There are some widowers, but usually it's the ratio is like way out of balance. God takes the man first, he leaves, because God knows we never make it on our own. What will we have for supper? Who would change the bed? Who would do the laundry? I guess our kids. Man, life would be, I can't imagine life without my wife. And I had this argument, I'm going first. I'm going first, just so you know. If I don't, you better add me to your prayer list, because life will not be very pleasant without her. She brings color to my world in every way. And when she gets done painting the house, it will be beautiful. I will love it. And I will tell her how much I love it. Because you color my world in a way that only you can. This is the other half. Guys, I'll give you a little tip. If you always treat her as a better half, you'll be glad you did. Together we make up the human race. Man and women. Very important part of the Bible. Very important part. See, there was no confusion when God made you. He made you male or female. It's funny. Thousands of years later, when you're born, you're either an M or an F. That's how it works. Man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of." That's why man is incomplete without. Theological concepts, let me just give you these quick as we kind of begin to wind this down. The New Testament assumes some important concepts. Let me give you these. These are very important because the New Testament builds off of this. Adam and Eve were historical people that lived on planet Earth. Say, that's a theological truth? That's a very important theological truth, because in many cases, even in some churches today, they teach that Adam and Eve were just, that they were figures, they weren't real people. No, Adam and Eve were real people, just like us. Hey, they sinned, didn't they? Just like us. Important truth. It's where evolution begins, to deny that God made us and that Adam and Eve were real people that God made. No, they weren't. They really weren't. Second theological truth is that the Bible speaks to the purpose and functions, not material origins. Genesis is not so much written to tell you how it came about, as it is to teach you how it works, how it functions. The early mind didn't think in these terms, and most of our minds don't. But when you get something, you want to know how it works. The ancient mind, that's how they thought in terms of how does it work? How does it work? So when Moses sat and penned the book of Genesis, he wasn't trying to give a description of all this, creative work of God, although that's there. But there's not a lot of detail about that. But what Genesis does in the beginnings, it says, here's how it functions. And the reason that it does that is that for us, some thousands of years later, the way it was set up originally by the Creator and the way it was set up to function is still how it functions today. And if you depart from that, it breaks down. Homosexuality will eventually break down. There will always be homosexuals. There always has been. What we are seeing today is nothing new. It's been around a long time. Okay? But homosexuality doesn't fulfill the mission. In fact, they have to depend on the breakdown of the family, because they need to adopt to pass on their lifestyle. They can't pass on their lifestyle. See, think about it. I'm not trying to, they can't. We we run into people like this, our mode is condemnation, our mode is compassion. I have an opportunity right now. I'd love to bring him out and he'd share his testimony with you. He's a young man, grew up in a Christian home, grew up in a Christian school, went to a Christian college and graduated, and struggles with same-sex attraction. It's just how God wired him. And there's no magical fix to it. He has to wrestle. And he does. He does. We meet, we golf together. Just what he wrestles with. But he also knows it doesn't produce long-term satisfaction. And I can't fulfill the mandate of Christ to be fruitful and multiply. So we have these conversations. They're interesting. His question to me is, how do I stop this? My answer to him is, I don't know. Tell me how to stop the temptation in my life. Wrestle. It's like it. And I think as a church, as you as a church wrestle with how do we go and reach out to more people, just remember this: the more people you're going to reach out to, the ones you're going to reach are hurting. The ones that you're going to touch are not the ones whose life is extremely successful. It's the ones whose life is broken and wrestling with issues because it's not working. That's who you're going to touch, and that's who you're going to reach. And you have to, at that point, be able to not condemn them, but love them for Jesus, because Jesus will. Remember what he said to the woman caught in adultery? The religious all wanted to stone her. I don't know if you've ever seen stoning in that section of the world, but they would dig a pit, and they would put that woman in the pit with her arms here, and they would fill that pit up to about here, since she couldn't move. And then they would begin to pelt her with stones. It wasn't a pretty sight. It's kind of what the law called for Jesus. As he stood, this lady, they're about caught in the very act of adultery, in the pit, ready to be stoned. Jesus looks at all those religious people and says, "You that don't have any sin, cast the first stone." All of them turned and walked away. When Jesus looked at this woman and said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." That's a powerful message. We're not here to condemn people. We're here to teach people and show people this is how you wrestle with your sin. That's what Jesus does. Go, sin no more. He didn't let her off the hook. He basically said, knock it off. Don't do this again. So he was tough. But he was tender. So as we reach out into mortal beings, we don't condemn. Guys, don't get caught up in the politics of it. Because politics condemns. Politics ridicules the other side. Don't get caught up in politics. That'll cause you to pick a side. You've got to be really careful. And I know saying that in this area is a tender subject too. But the answer to this nation is not the right person in the political office. The answer for this nation is the right person residing in the heart of the individual. The answer is Jesus. And only that. And our mission is not to get them to vote in a certain way. Our mission is to get them to Christ. Amen. Because